The European Union. It's sort of like the Windows of politics. It's slow, it doesn't work perfectly, and sometimes it just crashes. Nonetheless, let us be honest, the other alternatives are not much better and can certainly be more costly. At the beginning of this year, it seemed like the far right was unstoppable. Some political analysts claimed that Brexit would be the beginning of the end for the European Union, and during this time the international media was full of words like Frexit or Czexit. However, this Eurosceptic furor wasn't to last for long. France has elected a brand new president, Emmanuel Macron, who stands up for the European Union like no one else. The same has happened in other elections around Europe. In other words, the European Union is alive and kicking, at least for the next 4 years. But do hold on for just a minute because things are more complex than what they might seem. In fact, not all EU fans are the same, and many of them don't even share the same opinion on what the EU should be. For instance, Macron stands for a fiscal union with the same taxes in every country. But neither Angela Merkel nor Jean-Claude Juncker are into that. On the other hand, the former Belgian Prime Minister Guy Verhofstadt, who is now president of the European Liberal Party, says that Europe should become a federation like the United States. But does everyone agree with that? Well, the answer is, rather unsurprisingly, no. In fact, the only thing shared by all these politicians is the fact that the EU is a good thing. But now the questions are, well, what is the European Union all about? What should it become? Is it a federation or a confederation? And what are the different models on the negotiation table? Well, today we are going to answer all of these questions.
What if Margaret Thatcher was right?
Margaret Thatcher is something like Elvis Presley to Eurosceptics. For decades, this woman, who was the British Prime Minister in the 1980s, has become the biggest inspiration for many of the movements that want to end the European project. But then again, reality is seldom simple. Now, it is true that Margaret Thatcher was a big critic of political integration. Back in the time, the European Union still didn't exist. It was just a community of countries that traded among themselves. Nevertheless, during the 1980s, different European governments agreed to deepen this integration. This is when they started talking about a single currency and new institutions. All of this culminated in 1992 with the signing of the Maastricht Treaty. But the question is, what did Margaret Thatcher think about all of this? Well, the truth is, if we forget about stereotypes and we actually read her memoir, we find quotes like this one.
Britain does not dream of some cozy, isolated existence on the fringes of the European community. Our destiny is in Europe as part of the community.
But importantly, this doesn't mean that Thatcher was in total agreement with all the European politicians. She just wanted a different model. Unlike those who wanted a United States of Europe with the capital in Brussels, she stood for a confederate model.
Certainly, we want to see Europe more united and with a greater sense of common purpose. But it must be in a way which preserves the different traditions, parliamentary powers, and sense of national pride in one's own country. Before we keep going, we gotta explain. What's the difference between a federation and a confederation? An example of a federation would be the United States of America. Texas and California have their own legislatures, their own governments, and their own laws. Today, for instance, marijuana is legal in California, but illegal in Texas. However, if the Congress in Washington, D.C. were to pass a law legalizing cannabis across the country, any state law that would contradict the federal one would be automatically abolished.
In a confederation, states have way more autonomy. Today, there are actually no confederations in the world, not even in Switzerland. Of course, in Switzerland, the different cantons enjoy a lot of autonomy and different taxes, but that doesn't mean they are a confederation. For instance, if the parliament at Brno would pass a law legalizing marijuana, the rest of the cantons would have to accept it. If Switzerland was a real confederation, each of the different assemblies would have to have a vote to decide whether they want to keep cannabis legal or not. So, despite what a lot of people say, Switzerland is clearly a federation. And so now you might be wondering, well, what exactly is Europe then? Is it a federation or a confederation? Of course, there are a lot of people who stand for the federal model. In the last few years, the champion of this idea has been the president of the Liberals, Guy Verhofstadt.
That we need to reform Europe, to make it a real federation, capable to act not only in the economic field, but also by establishing a defense union, by establishing a European investigation capacity.
But let's go back to the facts. Today, despite what it looks like, national governments have a lot of autonomy. For instance, years ago, Brussels passed a directive banning smoking in bars. After that, each of the member countries had to vote on their own anti-tobacco law. And, well, you know what happened? Well, Austria and the Czech Republic did not pass those laws, and during those years, you could smoke in the cafes of Prague or Vienna, while in Berlin and Paris, it was completely forbidden. Even the VAT, which is the main European tax, is different in each country. In Spain they pay 21%, but in Hungary they pay 27%, and in Germany they've got a 19% tax. In other words, Europe is not a federation, but it's also not a confederation either. It's kind of a federal confederation. And now you're probably wondering, is this federal confederation model actually working, or do we need to move ahead with some sort of United States of Europe?
What's wrong in the European Union?
We all have heard about the many mistakes this European integration has made, but the truth is many of these flaws could have happened in the member states individually. As an example, let us have a look at the refugee crisis. Now, it is true that Brussels was incapable of crafting a common policy to give asylum to all the citizens that are running away from countries like Syria, Iraq, or Libya. But let's not lie to ourselves, the same happens in every single country. In Spain, for example, the national government did everything they could to avoid welcoming the refugees. On the other hand, Madrid's City Hall did the exact opposite.
Entonces el Ayuntamiento de Madrid va a generar todo un proyecto de acogida.
The City Hall of Madrid will make a welcoming project, so the refugees will have a place to live.
In other words, we cannot expect Brussels to solve the problems that nation-states have always had. In politics, such things, they're simply not possible. But do hold on for a moment, because this does not mean the European Union is perfect either. In fact, there are many problems that are endemic to this institution. For example, let's imagine you are a freelancer living in Hungary and you work for a company based in Belgium. Should you include VAT on the invoice that you send to them? Well, according to EU legislation, you shouldn't because, well, it's a service contract. But each country has its own tax laws that in many cases contradict the EU laws. But not only that, what VAT should you include on that invoice? The Hungarian one or the Belgian one? All these problems could be solved if there was a common ground on taxation matters. But many countries don't want to lose sovereignty on this matter, and no one dares make the first step towards this. So as you might imagine from this, it's pretty hard for important decisions to move forward. So the question is, what could be the solution to this problem?
A club with different kinds of members?
Constitutions, they are useful. They allow politicians and legislators to know what they can do and what they can't. It's sort of like a minimal agreement. This way, a government knows what it can pass as a law, and it's a system that has been proven effective. So, well, what's the problem? Well, all attempts to release a European constitution have failed. In 2005, both France and the Netherlands had referendums where they rejected the proposal for a European Magna Carta. Years later, Brussels politicians met again to write a new version of this constitution, the so-called Lisbon Treaty. This was a milder version of the previously drafted constitution, but integration problems persisted. The truth is that each country has its own interests, and it's hard to get them all on the same page. So, why not just recognize the differences? And this is why the European Commission has made the European White Book, where they imagine 5 potential scenarios for EU reform. One of them would allow each state to have a different level of integration.
On the other hand, at the beginning of 2017, The Economist proposed to create a European Union with different kinds of memberships. On one hand, there would be a premium member who would share a common currency, common fiscal policy, and a common foreign policy. On another one, there would be a silver member who would just share a common market and the free movement area. Other members, let's call them the bronze category, would have access to just the common market. This way, it would be way easier to convince every country to pass a European constitution.
In the meantime, the idea of a United States of Europe, it's lost a lot of supporters. The idea of a Europe with different membership levels, however, currently enjoys a lot of support. Meanwhile, France's brand new president is willing to play a major role in the future of Europe, but what does he really stand for? Well, we're not answering that in this video, but if you'd like to know more about Emmanuel Macron, don't forget to check out this video that we made. So now our question to you is, do you think this hybrid of a federal confederation with different member categories can actually work, or should we keep trying for a federation where everyone has the same rules? Please do let us know what you think in the comment section below. And by the way, we'd like to thank Professor Oscar Sanchez, a constitutional expert from the University of Valladolid, for helping us in making this video. And if you're new to VisualPolitik, please do not forget to subscribe. We publish brand new videos every Monday and Thursday, so do hit that subscribe button below so you won't miss any post. And if you like this video, do give it a thumbs up. And as always, I'll see you next time.
And if you'd like to hear more of my lovely voice, you can join us at Reconsider, the podcast that covers politics, but we don't do the thinking for you. Available on your favorite podcatcher. See you there.